Hopefully I can sync up the audio. If not, hope that helps. COVID. Ooh, 2020. Ugh. I've written a little article, so I'm just gonna rattle it off as best as I can. Still not great with videos, however, I've got a massive script this time, so. COVID has all but disappeared from the public consciousness. Any stoic sense of duty for public health from the beginning of the pandemic, replaced with the persistent and all-consuming chaos and lies of mainstream media. COVID is a thing of the past, a trivial thing to be concerned with, and all around, it's a thing to be forgotten. A dark time to be forgotten even. A stain on our, consciousness. The way that people talk about it is quite strange. Just because the government messaging around COVID-19 has ended doesn't mean that it's gone anywhere. Ultimately, the far-right media narrative has succeeded in convincing everyone that personal freedom supersedes the urgent need to protect the vulnerable in society, the elderly and immunocompromised. And also that COVID is just simply like a cold or flu, which only affects those two groups, which is not true. And it's sort of leached its way into the UK's public consciousness through anti-vax propaganda and conspiracy propaganda, and just generally a lot of mainstream media is very, very right-leaning. It's probably everywhere right now. Not just the UK, I mean. Anyway, the right depends wholly on this sense of, paranoid individualism, which preys on our very worst instincts, which I think part of the reason that masking is not widespread anymore, because, well, at least in my case, just, laziness, I guess, but not really laziness, more just, because I knew the whole time, I knew about COVID, I knew that it was still bad, and I knew that it was still around. I just sort of figured, well, everybody else is masking, and there's no sort of community thing. There is now. It's forming now, because I'll get to it. It's coming. Hold on. Anyway, COVID statistics have long since been inaccurate due to lack of testing, challenges in determining cause of death, and poorly functioning death registries. We can assume the death toll of COVID to be much higher than it is presented because of the use of masks declining. The effects of COVID are well studied but not well known. COVID has effects on the entire body and on every organ. It's a neurodegenerative and cardiovascular disease with effects on every organ, and its long-term effects can be intensely crippling, with the biggest symptom being post-exertional malaise. Or, extreme fatigue. That's the first thing that most people notice is extreme fatigue. Anyway, the spike protein of COVID-19 can linger in the body after infection, particularly in the meninges, the lining of the brain and spine, which shows patterns of neurodegeneration similar to that of Alzheimer's in long COVID patients. It's been observed that vaccinations don't actually mitigate any of the neurological risks of long COVID, meaning they won't protect you from neurodegeneration caused by COVID. So, yeah, one study showed that 29% of teenagers from the study had not recovered from COVID infection after 2 years, which, I'm not sure when this study was from, but if it's from 2023 or 2022, no, 2024. Interesting. Another showed that COVID infection doubled the risk of heart attack, stroke and death, and was 4 times more likely in severe cases which required hospitalisation. Quote, "Given that more than 1 billion people worldwide have already experienced COVID-19 infection, the implications for global heart health are significant," said study leader, whose name I can't pronounce, in October 2024. So, it's gonna come up on a year on that soon, which means, even more people will have had COVID by then, because people still aren't masking on the whole, which isn't good. Anyway, a recent polybias-supported study from 2025 provides evidence for the idea that COVID can cause long-term immune and metabolic damage, resulting in chronic illness. Quote, "The researchers observed a state of ongoing inflammation, including persistent activation of the peripheral immune cells and systemic oxidative stress. T cells, particularly CD8 cells, which are responsible for killing infected cells, a crucial part of the immune system, which are also a biomarker for HIV and AIDS, showed signs of exhaustion and poor function. Quote, "These findings parallel patterns seen in chronic infections like HIV, which are known to deplete immune surveillance." The study also raises concerns around increased cancer risk due to the disruption of genes involved in tumor growth and immune... The study also raises concerns around increased cancer risk due to the disruption of genes involved in tumor growth and immune function. Not good. There's been an anecdotal increase in... Sorry, let me reposition. Anecdotal increase in unheard of cancers in all age groups that's been kind of noted by people who work with cancer patients. It's kind of hard to be proven with statistics, but it's pretty likely to have some correlation to COVID now that we have evidence that it's cancer-causing or oncological. Oncological. I think that's the word. Anyway. For example, 10 maternity nurses, all working on the same ward, all developed brain tumours. Of course, in a setting where masking was abandoned, allowing free spread of airborne diseases like COVID, and shockingly, the hospital concluded there was no environmental risk. The polybias study concludes that the findings emphasize an urgent need for more research aimed at studying the impact of persistent SARS-CoV-2 infection on cancer development. All in all, contrary to the messages in mainstream media, COVID can cause a systemic, catastrophic collapse just with one infection, let alone repeat infections like everybody's been getting for years since we've all kind of gone maskless. This is the issue with trying to determine the cause of death in the case of non-acute COVID deaths, because COVID can be the domino to cause a host of other health issues and disabilities due to organ damage, like POTS, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, which is where, you stand up, you get a bit lightheaded and you kind of get palpitations, postural orthostatic tachycardia, MECFS, chronic fatigue syndrome, not an expert in that one, MCAS, mast cell activation syndrome. All of them are pretty heavily underdiagnosed due to the extreme difficulty of pursuing a diagnosis, particularly for women and racial minorities. Not to mention, long COVID can have a devastating impact on mental health, with patients being really far more likely to develop PTSD, depression and anxiety, appearing as a symptom of the illness and also as a consequence of losing their ability to function as they did before infection. It's also worth noting that trans people are way more likely to get long COVID. So there's that. Despite the ever-increasing amount of studies raising the alarm and the amount of people disabled by long COVID growing every day, the NHS no longer offers targeted support for the disease. A&E now has a dedicated sore throat and cold ward, and yet refuses to acknowledge meaningfully the existence of COVID-19, which is pretty evident in the removal of mask mandates in healthcare. People, if you're wearing a mask and you go to hospital, if they're nice, they might be like, do you want us to wear a mask while we're, treating you? But that does not make a difference, really, on the whole, in terms of, preventing the spread of COVID. Anyway, our healthcare system is overburdened, underfunded, and understaffed, which results in a system of pathological denial. Patients are sent around in loops of referrals with no answers, no improvement in symptoms, all to avoid accountability being placed on the NHS, and therefore any chance of being forced to pay out compensation. Yay! In fact, GPs are now being offered bonuses of £20 per patient to deny referrals to hospitals to reduce waiting list times, instead encouraging referrals to already overburdened health centres. The reality of chronic illness is ignored and overshadowed by the pseudo-scientific opinions of GPs who haven't read the appropriate scientific literature surrounding the effects of COVID before treating such patients, and who are more likely to deny necessary tests in favour of suggesting to walk it off. And I put in brackets, despite post-exertional malaise being one of the biggest symptoms and struggles of long COVID, potentially as a consequence of newly acquired heart problems. Which, if you've just had COVID, I don't remember what it is, but your risk of heart problems, of stroke and blood clots and shit, is way high, directly after you've been infected. It's something crazy 33 times, and then as as the time passes, it gets better. But the people, GPs encouraging, if you go to a GP and tell them you have long COVID and they tell you to walk it off, don't fucking listen to them, because you'll give yourself a stroke or heart attack or blood clots and shit. You need to rest after COVID. If you can, you need to rest. And then, once you're better, you need to get back to exercising to try and mitigate the fact that you now have an increased risk of heart attacks and a bunch of other shit. But anyway, as well as all of this, there is the ever-present abusive attitudes of our government in its current targeted attack on disabled Britons through benefits cuts. For long COVID sufferers, the answers lie outside the NHS in the sea of long COVID studies that all point to one truth: we've been lied to. The present situation of public health is culminating in collapse, showing the deep cracks in our healthcare system. But these are problems that have been present for decades. Racism and misogyny are at the heart of the issue. It's been known since mid-2020 that Black, Asian, Hispanic, and other minority ethnic groups, or global majority ethnic groups, are far more likely to suffer as a result of COVID. Black and Asian communities in England had a 23% higher risk of experiencing excess deaths from a study in 2023, and Black Americans were 3 times more likely than their white counterparts to contract COVID, and this is a study from 2020. The problem's largely intersectional, because poorer economic conditions for those groups lead to higher infection rates, and therefore worse health outcomes. For example, Black people are more likely to have pre-existing conditions which predispose them to infection, most often caused by environmental racism, which is the disproportionate risk of exposure to pollution, mold, damp, and other environmental hazards in minority and low-income communities. So, not only is it a systemic problem, but it's also a systemic racism problem, as is almost everything almost everything in this country. Anyway. Low-income communities, in addition, they're more likely to face unfair working conditions, to be denied sick pay, etc., all of which increases their health risk. Like, if you can't take time off work, but you've just had COVID, that's worsening your risk. Especially if you go back to work and then get COVID again. Like, it's a hell scenario. Anyway, I've put a graph here, which maybe if I can be bothered, I'll put in the video of COVID deaths by 100,000 people by race/ethnicity. And the very highest is African American, which is 97. And then in comparison, white people is 46.6, which might be less than half, which means that black people die at twice the rate from COVID as white people do. This is not good. This is not good, guys. Anyway, in all likelihood, the government and the NHS are well aware of these facts, and the truth is they simply don't care. A recent study found that HEPA filters reduced viral load in the air, reducing airborne COVID by 98%, making them an extremely important and effective first-line defence against COVID in health or social care settings, or anywhere else for that matter. It should just be fucking standard to have clean air. But they have not been implemented, most likely due to the lack of support or awareness. There's a petition on this which only has about 5,000 signatures, which will be in the description. Yet the Houses of Parliament has its own HVAC system installed by Purified Air in 2014, which makes use of electrostatic precipitators to remove viruses from the air. Police stations are also expected to have full ventilation systems. There appears to be a double standard for environments deemed important enough or worthy enough of clean air, and others that aren't. This is also the case for the fight against mould and damp in rented properties. Another environmental hazard which causes disabilities, which is, pretty well studied, I think, mould leading to disabilities, enough that, we understand it as environmental racism, but not enough for them to do anything about it, because the people responsible are being left unaccountable through the systems of institutional denial, just as with COVID. Anyway, these contradictions heartily embraced by the current neoliberal government, claiming to support the people's health and yet ushering in the removal and destruction of systems in place to protect the disabled and prevent disability, such as mask mandates, personal independence payment, as well as neglecting environmental hazards in rented properties. This is all setting the stage for assisted death as a solution. The lack of social support for disabled people, those affected by COVID, the elderly, the mentally or physically ill, etc., who are already more likely to become homeless or to be a drain on government funds, leaves them as an easy target. I do not see it as a coincidence that we are following in the footsteps of Canada's MAID programme, state-sanctioned relief for people who were failed by the government due to improper access to healthcare or housing, with said relief being death. The state's only solution to the complex, long-term and presently unsolvable problem of COVID and COVID-induced disability, without spending money. It would be easily solvable if, the culture changed and whatever, but the presently unsolvable issue of COVID and COVID-induced disability, compounded by the ever-worsening cost of living crisis, the solution can only ever be to relieve the working class of having to experience it. Quote, some persons with disabilities were turning to medical assistance in dying because they felt they had no other options, which was terrifying. Reads a summary of Canada's National Human Rights. Pardon me. Reads a summary of Canada's National Human Rights Institution's comments on a 2025 UN report Gotta shuffle again. Which condemns the programme's neglect towards disabled patients who seek aid due to suffering economically. Many disabled Canadians seek aid due to problems such as being unable to... I think I just need a drink, hold on. Okay. The mask is staying down. Don't wear a mask like this, and in fact, don't wear a cosplay mask thinking that it's going to protect you from COVID either. But anyway, where were we? Persons with disabilities turning to medical assistance and dying because they felt they had no other options, which was terrifying. Reads a summary of Canada's National Human Rights Institution's comments on a 2025 UN report which condemns the programme's neglect towards disabled patients who seek aid due to suffering economically. Many disabled Canadians seek aid due to problems such as being unable to find or afford accessible housing, seeking assisted death as an alternative to homelessness. Currently, the UK's assisted dying scheme doesn't include those with physical, long-term, incurable disabilities, but in all likelihood, once it's introduced, any protections against a waking nightmare, like Canada's MAID system, will be removed by MPs who've already proven that they lack compassion for their disabled constituents. In countries where assisted dying was introduced, protections for disabled people were swiftly removed in the following years. Life is already unaffordable on universal credit, especially for disabled people who can no longer access the lifeline of personal independence payment. You know, if you're not aware, something like 13% of people who claim the enhanced rate of PIP were removed, but 86% of people who claim the regular PIP were removed. Those people aren't suddenly better. They're just going to be poorer, you know. And everyone's already suffering, so that's great. The squeeze of Labour's right-to-work schemes, paired with assisted death, will be felt first and foremost by the disabled and the elderly. End-of-life care as a part of the NHS is already incredibly underfunded, understaffed and overworked, and vulnerable people can and will be pushed to death or suicide, as is already happening. The DWP's own report of the effects of PIP concludes around 1,600 working-age people die each year after their PIP claim is rejected, due to being so severely ill. But now it may become efficiently state-assisted. The overwhelming message really is work or die, which creates a toxic culture and a stigma around discussions of disability more broadly, with any admission of struggling being seen as an admission of weakness. Also, I would just like to touch on palliative care. Or, I'm trying to find what I said. End-of-life care. Palliative care, yeah. I used to work in a care home. I was 17. I was horrifically undertrained. I did all of the training, but I'm a little bit slow, and I had no idea what I was doing, and everyone just kind of left me on my own to look after a bunch of people semi-frequently. It wasn't terrible, nothing went terribly wrong, but something could have gone terribly wrong, because I was, 17, and everyone there was completely overworked. We were understaffed. It was just kind of the worst environment possible to be in if you were an elderly person. At the end of their life, it's not good, and their solution to the fact that it's really not good seems to be, we'll just kill him. They're already at the end of their life. It doesn't matter, right? We don't need to care. And then we don't need to pay. We don't need to pay money for their care. Silly. We just kill them. I hope this helps. Anyway. back to what I've written. Toxic culture and stigma around discussions of disability. Confusion and infighting typically underpins any discussion about COVID, particularly in online spaces, as a direct result of eugenicist ideas being deeply socially encoded. For example, some people go as far as to claim masking in 2025 is a mental illness. People who are still concerned with masking are clinically insane, etc. This draws quite a clear parallel between the treatment of those questioning the state's agenda as mentally ill, with mental health institutions historically being used to suppress political dissidents. It's not hard to see why the reactionary response to masks in 2025 is as such, and I'll put it on the screen probably. Not sure about the rest of you, but I am grateful those folks are still wearing masks in 2025. Those masks aid me not only in identifying their pronouns, but their mental status. The overlap between ableism and other narratives of bigotry around wokeness is too much to ignore, but I think this next post can help to explain the root of them. Please stop with the fucking mask tweets. OMG, OMG. It's 2025. They didn't work in 2020. They sure as hell aren't gonna work now. They're a massive trigger, and I will just block any account I see tweeting about them. Enough is enough. So that one really got me. Because it's just like, yeah, I'll just read what I wrote. COVID was a deeply unsettling time for all of us. It shook the foundations of industrial society by bringing it to a halt. It left a deep psychological scar, but it also offered up an opportunity for many of us to begin to reflect and imagine a better future. It opened up the opportunity to realise the absurdity of a capitalist society when during lockdown nature visibly began to thrive again, with animals taking to the streets of major cities and CO2 emissions falling by 5.4% in 2020 during lockdown. Masking's become a symbol of something bigger, both as a reminder of the time that the government would rather we conveniently forget about, to enable the continued disabling and death of the working class and maintain the terror and individualism of the current system, but also as a symbol of the better future that community solidarity can build. Resistance against pollution of our health, our earth, and our hearts by capitalist ideals. Not only that, but it is becoming a symbol of resistance to an ever-worsening police state. With facial recognition technology on the rise in the UK, creating face prints of often completely unsuspecting citizens. And if you haven't seen, if you know the Big Brother watch people, they have a video about it. There's face recognition zones, face scan zones, where the police will set up a van that has a big fuck off camera on it, and a tiny little sign on a lamppost or something saying face recognition zone, but most people don't notice or care, so it scans your face, and it's compared against a database to see if you're a naughty bugger and they need to arrest you. But from what I've seen, a lot of the time, of course, it's just used to be dicks. It's police state shit. I won't get into it in this video, but the anxiety around masks is projected onto those wearing them, who often do so out of necessity to protect their health, rather than onto the institutions inducing this collective anxiety and limbo state where nothing substantial is done to protect anyone from COVID. The path forward is uneasy, but fairly clear. HEPA filters should be a necessity in health and social care. The culture around masking needs to shift into being more accepting of the reality of airborne illness, and prioritise well-fitted and high-filtration masks, so not like this. This is just for my cosplay. Having our heads in the sand won't prevent continued unnecessary deaths from a disabling illness that we know logically how to prevent. No revolutionary movement can thrive without putting the health of the working class at the forefront, and right now, as we watch the NHS continue to crumble, is as good a time as any to begin considering how we could build our own systems of care. Thinking in a global context, our culture of hygiene as a Western power is highly influential for countries with less access to healthcare, such as high filtration masks. The unmitigated spread of disease in the UK, allowing viruses to mutate, leads to worsening spread elsewhere. As the choking effects of climate change begin to accelerate, this is ever more important. We can't afford to simply abandon the weak, as is the view of current governments everywhere. So, yeah, that was everything I wrote. I don't think I have anything else to add, because I think I covered all of it. But, yeah, we have access to masks. We could easily curb the spread of COVID. We could prevent so many people from getting neurodegenerative illness that is similar to AIDS. Progressive AIDS, that we don't currently have a cure for, or even really any treatments. There's antiviral drugs. You can try supplements. I started taking creatine and electrolytes and shit, and that's helped me. But yeah, the reason I wasn't wearing masks is because I was at the fucking club. I was at the club and then I got long COVID and now I'm just fucked. It's not worth it. It's really not worth it. And yeah, I think I'm just scared that the only way that message is going to get through to more people is if they get long COVID. But the reality is most of us already do have long COVID. It's just not gotten bad enough yet that we can recognize it. And also, information about it is not hard to come by, but not readily available either. If you go to the GP and list off all your symptoms of long COVID, fatigue, can't breathe, can't really move, chronic pain, they'll just be have you tried eating better? It's fucking ridiculous. Anyway, that's me done. I hope this was helpful. I hope it was intelligible. Again, one more thing. There is a vote, an MP vote in 15 days and 17 hours, according to notdeadyetuk.org, which is a charity? No, National Grassroots Disability Rights Group. So not a charity, it's technically mutual aid. Check out their Instagram and stuff, it will be in the description. There's an MP vote in 2 weeks to vote on assisted dying, which is pretty bleak, because if we can't make enough noise about it, and if we can't contact our MPs enough about it, it's probably going to pass. So basically the whole reason I've made this video is then to try and encourage you to make as much noise as you can, talk to your friends or whatever, whoever, about assisted dying, why it's bad, and yeah, you don't even have to mention COVID. I mean, assisted dying is a bad idea in general, really, because it just opens up disabled and elderly people to abuse, and it also opens the door to eugenics, of course, which is not good, and it's also obviously the direction that America's going, and has been going for years. While I'm at it, eugenics. We've had eugenics in the UK for years as well. We've had austerity, which is itself eugenics. I forgot the name of the lady, but I'll put her account on screen. That she's got some great videos about this if you want to check it out. Apart from that, that's everything. just wanted to add that very quickly. Thank you for watching my video.